A decade ago, after serving in the Clinton White House, Susan Rice became one of the youngest ever to be named Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. Here she visited with Mozambique's president. At 32 years old, her responsibilities included more than 40 nations. When al-Qaeda bombed U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya, Rice was deeply involved in the official government response. As President-elect Barack Obama named Rice as his UN ambassador, she called his election a signal to the world that America is on the path to change and must meet new challenges.
To prevent conflict, to promote peace, combat terrorism, prevent the spread and use of nuclear weapons, tackle climate change, end genocide, fight poverty and disease.
Susan Rice was born in 1964. She was a Rhodes Scholar and holds degrees from Stanford and Oxford universities. After her government service, Rice spoke of her horror at seeing decomposing bodies in Rwanda in 1994, the victims of genocide. She has vowed to do whatever she can to prevent future mass killings. Recently, Rice publicly called on Congress to authorize the use of force to end bloodshed in the Darfur region of Sudan, where the UN estimates up to 300,000 people have died. As a senior fellow at a Washington, D.C. research center, the Brookings Institution, last year, Rice testified at a Senate hearing on the Darfur region.
I want to be clear, I didn't come to the conclusion that we ought to use military force, even limited strikes, casually or quickly. Like you, Senator Biden, I'm not crazy about killing people. But I do think that at a certain point we have to ask when enough is enough.
In light of such concerns, advocates raise the issue of China's arms sales to Sudan. Princeton Lyman, a former U.S. ambassador to South Africa and Nigeria, says Rice could appeal to China's desire for international recognition.
To say, look, if you want to be a world player and you want to be, we've got to work together on bringing peace to Darfur. If one could convince China and Russia to cut back on arms shipments or make them conditional in some way, that would be a very strong step forward.
Lyman also says President-elect Obama's decision to elevate the U.S. ambassadorship to a cabinet-level position is very significant.
We don't do that with our ambassadors to Geneva even or to NATO. So it sends a very strong message, and I think it does give her much more influence and respect in New York.
In the UN, Rice will confront lingering tensions over the Bush administration's 2003 push for war in Iraq.
On the
and
left
later
is a
for
close-up
reform
of one of the
body.
four.
Brett Schaefer is with the politically conservative Heritage Foundation. He says diplomacy alone often cannot overcome long-standing differences.
You have to acknowledge that sometimes countries are going to disagree. It's an honest and it's a useful way of looking at foreign affairs.
The diplomatic community sees Rice's opposition to the war and her association with a new administration as an advantage. Schaefer says some people have described Rice as a strong-willed person who does not mince words, but he says in the diplomatic world that's often an attribute.
Someone with an aggressive personality who is willing to really forcefully defend the U.S. positions at the United Nations, I think, is necessary and vital.
Rice is praised as a conscientious, hard worker with a solid diplomatic background. She faces Senate hearings and a confirmation vote before she could become, at 44 years old, the second youngest U.S. ambassador to the UN. Robert Raffaele, VOA News.